The right bait. Our earliest memories are foundational to our identity and the key to our very being. Long before the capacity of our actual recall, most of us have mama stories. Virtually every mother rehearses events about their babies, retelling the stories of our earliest life long before we have memory or cognition. And then all mothers do what we all dread. They apply their perceptions of our earliest personality to the current patterns of our lives, as if they, by seniority and maternal priority, have some divine intuition into our entire future. For instance, I was late for my own birth by 2 weeks. Therefore, of course, I've been late for everything else since. Or, I was such a calm, self-content infant, moving my hands around in the air, looking up to the ceiling, that my mother insists, even to this day, that I was seeing and talking to angels. Therefore, of course, I was called by God into the ministry as an adult. One of the most ancient incidents I do remember clearly was when we went fishing for the very first time with my father. I was just 4 years old. My family was camping in the local provincial park underneath the long shadows of the mighty Ivy Lee Bridge that connected Canada to the United States, right near Brockville, Ontario, that very small town where I was born. This massive steel suspension bridge towered over the mighty St. Lawrence River and Seaway. Majestic ocean liners and huge freighters fearlessly sailed beneath her soaring superstructure. And we had a front row seat. Now that night, my parents made a warm campfire, and I discovered something. Roasted marshmallows, yummy! Before bedding down in our tent, the tent without a floor, my dad told me that he was taking me fishing very early in the morning. Well, he was right. It was dark and cold to my tired body when my father woke me up. I got dressed, and we stumbled in an eerie, misty grayness down the slippery banks to the St. Lawrence River, carrying fishing poles and a thing called a bait box. My dad told me that this St. Lawrence River emptied the Great Lakes into the oceans, and it was about 2 miles wide. I didn't know what all that meant, but I took it also very seriously. In the pre-dawn, a low and pale pink cloud lay in the far bank of the river. But then richer colors starting to shimmer near the horizon, and the darkness began to retreat. But my dad, he'd come to fish. That was when also the very first time that I ever touched a worm, which was bad enough. But then my father insisted that I had to put the worm on the hook. Yuck! Finally, I was all set, ready to fish, and I dropped the baited hook in the water with a splash, only to begin to wait. My father told me that the fish were not up yet, and for me to be patient. So I watched that red and white bobber floating on the water and waited for the fish to wake up and want their breakfast, and then bite my squirmy, wiggly worm on the end of that sharp hook. That poor little worm was probably drowning in the water. I was reasoning with childhood reason and thinking, but then my dad softly touched my shoulder, breaking me from such sad and childish thoughts, and pointed. Then I saw the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. There was a shiny golden sun just beginning to rise up from its bed beneath the earth. In a brilliant curve, it was perfectly framed and rising right underneath the amazing arch of the longest span of that bridge. I was transfixed, and slowly the sun cleared the horizon and then accelerated in its liftoff. I distinctly remember telling my father, "Dad, there must be a God, a creator. He's painted such a wonderful sight just for us." a fact that seemed entirely obvious to me, as there was no one else around. In fact, from that time, I think that I've always believed in God, and do not remember a time that I did not believe that He existed. And while I was watching, the sun became increasingly brighter and more yellow, and the world began to wake up too. Soon the eye-hurting but glorious sun was embracing the bridge, silhouetting its amazing span. From that day, I've always loved sunrises, remembering that life-shaping time that I realized there is an almighty being who created the universe. And He paints the sky, and He tenderly cares for all of us. Suddenly, I felt a tug in my small hands. And only then did I realize that I was supposed to be fishing rather than sightseeing or even worshiping. My dad definitely showed me how to set the hook and helped me to reel in the fish that had swallowed my little worm. What a catch! My very first fish! Of course, it was a beautiful, shimmering, multicolored little sunfish who was so cute, he was just flipping his tail for me. So, of course, I let him go back to his home in the water. What a morning I had had with my father. I had come to fish, but God had caught me with a sunrise. I hope you enjoyed this short story that was so foundational to my very being, and perhaps it might inspire you to recall an event in your own life that shaped your identity. Psalm 19:1 ever reminds us that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies display His craftsmanship. So look up and remember,